channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy Booktube hats, and today I'm doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I always think about doing this tag every year, and then I checked the history on my channel this year and realized the only time I have ever done the mid-year book freakout tag was in 2017, and that was a while ago. I think part of it is that the mid-year tag is sort of meant to counterbalance the end-of-year videos, and I don't do yearly reading goals, so I don't have those sort of like goal check-ins and end-of-year videos like some people do. Nevertheless, it's a fun tag, and I should do it more often. I'll link the information for the original tag down in the description below, but this has been around for years. Anyways, the first two questions are the best book you've read so far in 2022 and the best sequel you've read so far in 2022. I have had 3 5-star reads total this year so far, and all 3 of them were sequels. So I'm going to take these 2 questions as one and just show you the 3 books. The first is A Conspiracy of Kings by Megan Whalen Turner, which is the 4th book in the Queen's Thief series. The second is Winterkeep by Kristen Cashore, which is the 4th book in the Graceling Realm series. And then the third is Lagoon Fire by Francesca Forrest, which is the sequel to The Inconvenient God. Question number 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. I haven't read a single 2022 release yet this year, or I haven't finished one. I am in the middle of reading one new 2022 release. But I don't really shift my focus to a current year's releases until after the Hugo Award reading and voting is over. Like, all of my focus is still on last year's books until that happens. But one that will definitely be a high priority for me once voting is closed is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. Question number 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I have done an entire anticipated releases video for the second half of the year. You can watch it. It was, I think, my previous upload right before this one. And there are, I think, 2 books on that list that are vying for the coveted spot of my most anticipated release for the second half of the year. The first is going to be Silverborn, The Mystery of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. That's going to be the 4th Nevermore book, and the second is going to be Sea Sparrow by Kristen Cashore. This will be the 5th Graceling Realm book. Question number 5, biggest disappointment. Okay, so we're gonna have a talk about DNFs, which I never talk about on this channel, mostly because when I end up picking up a book and then putting it down again, I usually do it like very quickly near the beginning of the book, and mostly I don't like DNF a book in that I decide I am not going to read this, or I'm going to rate and review it at a certain percent completed because I'm not going to read the rest. Mostly I just end up saying this is not for me right now, but it's going back on the TBR. And I don't post a DNF on Goodreads. I don't shelve them separately. If I decide I have absolutely no interest in a book that I own, I might quietly unhaul it. I also don't do unhaul videos, so normally you do not hear about me DNFing books on this channel. However, I have a real DNF to share with you today as my biggest disappointment of the year so far. This is a book that I've had out from the library for a while. I keep renewing it because I kept thinking for the longest time I was going to finish it. And I've just decided that it's not going to happen, and this is Malice by Heather Walter. I am a full third of the way through this book, and it's not hard reading. I felt for the longest time that I should be able to finish it because it is fairly light reading. But the more I tried to press through this, the more I realized that it was just heading into 2-star territory, and I wasn't interested. This is the first book in a duology. It's the author's debut novel, and this is supposed to be a Sleeping Beauty retelling with like a villain protagonist and a sapphic romance. And I feel really conflicted about what I've read so far because there are a lot of things that have annoyed me so far in the first third of this book, and I cannot tell where the author is going with them. Like, I can't tell if the author knows that these things are annoying and is planning on addressing them later, or if it's just sloppy writing. The protagonist, Alice, is not the dark fairy who cursed the royal family's line of princesses. In this book, the princesses of the royal family have been cursed for generations, and the protagonist, Alice, is someone who has like dark fae blood, even though the dark fae are thought to have been totally vanquished. So she isn't the villain from the fairy tale. Honestly, the beginning of this book presents her as more of a Cinderella archetype. There is sort of an entire Cinderella plot that happens in the beginning of the book, and I almost can't tell if it's intentional or not. A third of the way through the book, it definitely feels like the plot has been more Cinderella than Sleeping Beauty. And the whole thing is that in this kingdom, some people with a little bit of magical heritage are born with special, like, powers, and these people are called the Graces. And they're all women, and they're supposedly, like, highly revered in society, and it's like a good thing if your child is born a Grace. But all the Graces are taken from their families at birth and trained to use their powers, and there's this whole system where they're, like, not allowed to refuse clients. They're forced to use their power until all of their power is used up, and then they get, like, retired or married off or something. Meanwhile, they're supposed to be like the toast of society or whatever, but it all seems very, very abusive to me, and like especially icky with this extra layer that all of the Graces are women. And I can't tell if the author knows that she has set up something that is extremely icky and uncomfortable, because the protagonist, Alice, who is the Dark Grace, is basically like the ugly duckling of the Graces, and she lives in this Grace house where all of the good Graces hate her. And her entire thing is just like despising the other Graces, and like she bonds with the princess over how much they both hate the frivolous Graces. I don't know, that's just one example of the things in this book so far that make me go, really? Anyways, I find the plotting to be kind of sloppy, like how all of the plot events just seem to be lined up in a row, one after another, like boom, 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 so the pacing feels off. The dialogue is pretty dull and uninspired, so like I don't get a great sense of the characters. I don't get a sense of the chemistry between the main romantic couple. The world building feels like something that might pass for okay in a YA novel, but this is adult and I was expecting more. Anyways, I'm going on about this in a video that's not a wrap-up, because you're not getting a wrap-up of this from me, because I'm not going to finish the book. I'm very disappointed. The bookmark is coming out now, and this is going back to the library. Okay, that was biggest disappointment. Question 6 is biggest surprise. That's going to be a book I've already shown you. That's going to be Lagoon Fire. I was expecting to like this. The first book, which was a very short novelette, was a 4-star read for me, so I was expecting that this would be about the same. I was not expecting this to impress me as much as it did. This is a novella. I think you could probably read this without reading book 1. They are separate stories with the same protagonist, who is a decommissioner of gods, and each of the 2 books focuses on a different god decommissioning mystery. But in this book, things get personal for Sweeting in a way that they didn't in The Inconvenient God. This book has layers and interesting world building and thorny moral issues. I think this is the type of fantasy novella that could have been really, really popular if it had been from a bigger publisher. I had basically heard nothing about this, but it was a 5-star read for me, so this is my biggest surprise. Question 7 is your favorite new author, either debut or new to you. This is a very tough question for me. I've read a lot of books from new-to-me authors so far this year. A few of them were debuts, but as you will have noticed, all 3 of my 5-star reads of the year were sequels, so obviously none of those were new-to-me authors. And I don't think I've yet read a second book from any author I've read so far in the first half of the year who was new to me. And I think for an author whose first book I read of theirs was a 4-star read, I really do need to read a second book to know if they're a new favorite author or not. Or not even a new favorite author, just someone whose books I will regularly be on the lookout for. But given that my options here seem to be either list a whole lot of authors or refuse to answer the question, I think I'm gonna go with the former, because that's gonna make for a more interesting video. So in terms of authors who are well loved that I've finally gotten around to reading, I finally read Ancillary Justice by Ann Leckie. I see what all the fuss is about. I read Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is one of this year's Hugo Novella nominees. Again, I can see why he's so popular. I'll definitely read more by both of these authors in the future. In terms of actual debut novels that I read, both Freya Marsk, author of A Marvelous Light, and Everina Maxwell, author of Winter's Orbit, have second books coming out that promise to be more of the same, and so I'm looking forward to reading both of those. If Natalie Zena Walshots were to write a sequel to Hench, I would absolutely read that. If she comes out with a new book instead that's something completely different though, I might have to see what it was going to be before deciding if I would pick it up or not. Honestly though, the more interesting answers for me are the ones in the middle of the spectrum, the authors who have multiple books out already, but who aren't super popular or widely known. I really enjoyed The Lord of Stariel by A.J. Lancaster. I plan on reading the rest of this Fantasy of Manners series. And then a couple of YA authors I picked up for the first time while looking for books to nominate for the Lodestar. Joan He, The Ones We're Meant to Find. This is her second novel, and it's science fiction, and it was honestly way lower priority on my TBR than her debut novel, Descendant of the Crane, which I had been planning on reading for much longer, but because this was a 2021 release, I picked it up when I was reading new releases for Hugo nominations. And I was impressed enough with this book, which is the one of hers that I was less personally hyped for, that now I'm even more excited to read her fantasy. And then Makia Lucier, author of Year of the Reaper. This is the first and so far only book I have ever picked up based on a TikTok recommendation, and I do not regret it at all. This is a standalone YA fantasy novel, and it's this author's 4th book. Her debut novel, which was published in 2014, is not speculative fiction. It's a historical novel called A Death-Struck Year. This is about the 1918 flu pandemic, and I absolutely will not be reading it. I'm very sorry. But her books following that were a fantasy duology called Tower of Winds. The first book was Isle of Blood and Stone, and the second one was Song of the Abyss. I vaguely remember seeing these covers when they were released. The first one was published in 2018 and the second in 2019. And I then heard nothing about them, so I figured they must not be good. They both have a very high average rating on Goodreads though, just not very many ratings. So I'm just thinking that maybe no one read them. Anyways, these books are now very much on my radar. If you've noticed my lights behind me are dying, it's true, they need new batteries. Question number 8 is newest fictional crush. This is a tough question. I feel like I've sort of outgrown having fictional crushes very often. I'm gonna go with the character Wynne from The Lord of Stariel, who I worry that I can't say anything about without spoilers. I mean, it's almost even a spoiler to say that he's the main love interest, because there are multiple characters at the beginning of the book who are presented as if they might be love interests for the protagonist, Hedda. I think it's pretty obvious that he's the one you're supposed to be rooting for, though. This is a friends to lovers romance, which is my ultimate ship dynamic. And then question 9 is new favorite character, and I think I'm gonna go with the same book because my answer is this book's protagonist, Hedda, a very modern young woman who has rebelled against her very traditional family and left her family estate to go to the big city and learn magic and become a stage illusionist. She is called back home after the death of her father because tradition dictates that the family members must all be present for the magical estate to select its new lord. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry. I have not cried at a single book this year. Like, I haven't even gotten choked up at a book this year, so I don't have one. Question number 11 is a book that made you happy. I'm going to go with Swordheart by T. Kingfisher. I think this is by far the funniest book I've read this year. It is laugh out loud funny, and that is why it made me happy. Question number 12 is favorite book to film adaptation you saw this year. I've racked my brain. I do not think I have seen one. However, there is one that I am very excited for, and that is the anime film The Deer King. This is an adaptation of a Japanese fantasy novel or series that has not been translated into English, but the author of the books is Nahoko Uehashi, who also wrote The Beast Player, which I read not that long ago, and I thought this book was really, really interesting, so I'm very interested to see an anime adaptation of a different book by the same author that is not available in English. This is going to have like very limited theatrical showings in US theaters this week, and I am really hoping I'm going to be able to see it. Question number 13 is favorite video you've made so far this year, and my answer for that is going to be the Hopeful Book Tag 2.0. This has been an utterly garbage year, and I think we could all use a little hope. Question number 14 is the most beautiful book you've bought or received so far this year. I've bought a number of very pretty ones, but I'm gonna go with Lake Lore by Anna Marie McLemore. It's very pretty. It's nothing like fancy under the dust jacket or anything. I never buy any of those fancy special edition whatevers. I never buy subscription boxes that sometimes have those fancy editions because I don't want any of the other stuff that comes in the subscription boxes. So you are getting, for the answer to this question, a very normal hardcover with what I think is a very pretty cover design. And the 15th and final question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I don't need to read anything by the end of the year. Why would I put pressure on myself? There's enough pressure in the world as it is. However, I am trying to read as many of the Hugo nominees as possible by the voting deadline. That is not going well. I'm reading very, very slowly right now. I haven't finished a single book so far in the month of July. Aside from the Hugo reading, there are some series I would like to continue with by the end of the year so that I don't go too long between reading books in the series. I mentioned that I read Ancillary Justice earlier this year. I do want to pick up the second book, Ancillary Sword, before I forget too much about the first one. I also think I want to finish reading the Queen's Thief series by the end of the year. There are 2 more novels in this series that I haven't read, Thick as Thieves and Return of the Thief. I think I want to read both of them sooner rather than later. Another series I want to continue on with sooner rather than later is The Stariel Quartet by A.J. Lancaster. And then in general, I think I want to read a bunch more manga by the end of the year. There are a number of manga series that I've enjoyed early volumes of that I just haven't continued on with or haven't finished or caught up with. I think I always imagine manga will be very easy to slip into my reading anytime, but then because I think it will be so easy to get to, I never prioritize it in my mind, so then I never actually read it. I have a number of manga series I definitely need to catch up with. And that is it. That is the end of my mid-year book freakout tag for 2022. Let me know if you've done the mid-year book freakout tag this year. Let me know if you like to do mid-year check-ins, even if you don't do annual goals. Is there value? Is there not value? I've sort of thought that maybe there should be a second half of the year book freakout tag to parallel this one, because it seems unfair that the first half of the year gets all this attention and then the second half of the year doesn't have its own like special half of the year tag. Maybe I'll make one this year. Anyways, I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.